Hey, it's Birdman for Birdman on the Mountain, hanging out once again at the Pinetop Coffee and Roasting Company. Hanging out here, of course, in Pinetop-Lakeside. We're going to go political. Well, not political. I'm going to talk to a person running. I've got with me Taber Heisler. How are you?
I'm good, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate the chance to get out and talk.
You bet, and it's open and available to anybody that's running to come on Birdman Media, as I've done that for the last 10 years. So you took the opportunity to do this, and here you are. I want to clarify, first of all, you're running for mayor.
I am running for mayor. Yes, sir.
Town of Pinetop-Lakeside. And so is Harry Turner. He is the other candidate that's up. There's a little difference. Harry's had both of you sit on council, or did. Harry had to step down because his term exceeded the time frame in which he was running for. It's a weird thing in Arizona law.
Yep.
Your term ends this year, correct? Okay, so you can run and still hold office while you're running. If the person's office term was going to run through into next year, they have to step down. That's why Harry has stepped down and you've not. I think I don't see any issue with people being on council. I think both of you should have been able to do that. So, and I've stated that online. It's a weird law. That's the way the law is. So that's what we're played with.
Yeah. So I think the best way, from my perspective, to explain it is, I will remain a Pinetop-Lakeside council member until November or December. If I was to be elected as mayor and I got seated as mayor, then I would cease being a Pinetop-Lakeside council member and I would become the mayor. In the split term position, those people will run on opposing terms. So Harry Turner's term would, in other words, he would still be a council member while he's as mayor.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because his term doesn't expire until December
I think
of
2 years later,
28, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so you've been on council. Let's start with the impetus. We got to go back as you being council member. You can even start as why you became council member and take us through, why you got to the point where you're like, I want to run for mayor.
Yeah, I think if you go back to why I originally put in for council member, it's a general disposition that I have that causes quite a bit of work for me, which is it's hard to sit back and complain about something and not getting involved. And so found myself, I guess you could say, frustrated with, the town and just really not seeing any positive, things going on, simple things like just, maintaining the town and the streets. And so rather than just sit back and continue to be frustrated about it, kind of complain about it from the background, I was like, man, it's time to go get involved and be a part of the process and see what it's about, right? Educate myself. And while I sit back and am frustrated about it as a community member, maybe there are things that I don't know as you become involved in the process that you find that are roadblocks or, financial problems or, things like that. And so that's how I kind of got involved.
And you started, if I remember correctly, you were appointed first, correct?
Yeah, so I put in an application for an appointment. I got an appointment. I was on for, I think, about a year. And then I pulled a packet and ran and was elected the following year to that seat for a 4-year term.
Good. Okay. So take us through then moving forward.
So, obviously moving forward, I feel like I've always tried to be engaged. As I stated, I'm trying to educate myself on the process, see what's going on. I've worked for government for a lot of my adult life, but I feel like while there's tons of similarities, there are different structures and forms of government. And so I just wanted to just kind of dip my feet in the sand, if you will. My grandmother would describe me as a young man as a bull in a china shop. And so she's like, you kind of, alienate people a little bit when you come in that way. And so maybe you come in a little bit lighter and you try to learn what's going on and see how things work. And then you can kind of, build yourself up from there. And so that's kind of the approach that I took. I would come in every council meeting about an hour before the council meeting, if not more, chat with staff members, just try to build relationships. And then I would often find myself sitting in the finance director's office and asking questions about things that I saw on financial statements, trying to understand why we were doing things the way we were doing them, asking questions about, hey, we bought $6,000 in gift cards. What are we doing to track those and make sure that they're, being distributed appropriately and that there's no room for somebody to accuse us of doing something less than equitable with those, or ethical, I should say, with those gift cards. And And I felt like I always got reasonable responses to those questions. Moving forward, and we went into the budget cycle for this year, and I have it down here. I actually have some notes for myself, but March 4th of 2025, we entered into the budget season for the town for this fiscal year, and it was a normal budget meeting. All the directors came in, they all sat down, they all gave their, I call it the wish list of all the things that they wanted to try to accomplish and budget for in the next fiscal year. And something that I always thought was a bit odd about the way that the town did their budgeting was when those directors came into that room, it seemed like the first time that any of them had ever been together. And what I mean by that is there was no coordination between the management staff in the town, between public works and the police department, the library and the clerk's office and community development, where they would sit down before that meeting and have a general conversation about what they're all going to be requesting. Because in my experience in government, that's how I've done it, is you sit down as a group and you kind of come up with what your plan is going to be for the years, because there's only so many dollars. And if I'm working in department A, then I'm requesting all of those dollars, then what is department B, C, and D going to do for money, right? And so you kind of have to have a unified approach as a management staff when you're coming to an elected body to ask them to approve a budget. But at the town, that never really seemed to happen, because there would be conflicts that would arise among directors about the things they were asking for in that meeting. The next meeting, I left and I'd been ordered on a wildfire assignment, and I serve on some incident management teams in different capacities. And so I'd been ordered up for a wildland assignment. I'm always well prepared to attend meetings while I'm gone. I have, I purchased a personal Starlink, and so I can always have connectivity if I need to be in a meeting. And we had a budget meeting scheduled during that time, and it was not sold as anything that was going to be extraordinary. It was just going to be a very normal budget meeting. And so, to be very honest, I didn't feel like I needed to attend that meeting. I felt like it was going to be kind of a little bit more detailed replay of the first meeting, which was just, kind of going over the wish lists and seeing what council had an appetite for. And so I didn't attend that meeting, and nobody had called me and said, "Hey, you really should attend this meeting. We're going to talk about some really critical things," or there was no email that came out that said, "Hey, we're going to disclose that we have a budget shortfall." None of that happened. And so again, I guess a little bit of ignorance on my part, but I just figured it was a normal budget meeting, and I didn't need to be there. And I actually had a conversation, and they said, "No, it's just a normal budget meeting. You don't need to take time out of your day to do it." Sometime after that, I got a text message from a town employee that said, "Hey, did anybody tell you that the town is $1.7 million short on money moving into this budget year?" And I said, "No, absolutely not."
And I want to make a disclosure here.
Sure.
So at this point in time, I worked for the town of Pinetop-Lakeside.
Yes.
So, and I wasn't the employee that texted you.
No, you were not. No, you were not.
So I want to make sure people know that there was no, I'm not sitting on the other side going, "Oh, I know it. I do know what's coming," because I did know things on the other side, but it had nothing to do with interaction with you at that point whatsoever.
No,
so,
it was not. It was not from you. It was actually from one of the directors at the town.
Yeah,
and I'll just leave it at that. But, and so I came back, and we had a meeting, a community education meeting on annexation scheduled. And we went into that meeting. We had a good conversation with a few folks that were there. And then we left the meeting. And on the outside, I asked the town manager and the mayor, I said, "What is this true?" And the answer was yes. But it was really kind of played off like, it's not that big a deal. We need to make some corrections. We might have to lay a few people off, but it's okay. We're going to be fine. And I was furious, because I was like, that's not okay. That's not fine. I'm not even sure how we get into this position in a professionally managed organization, because we should be looking at our past and our future all the time to try to understand what the economy's doing and what we can expect for revenues and what we've seen historically. And then that helps us project our future. So I felt like it was really poor reflection on all of us, council members included, myself included, that we were even in this position. And so we had a budget meeting scheduled. I took some time and reflected and came into that budget meeting well prepared to ask some difficult questions.
Yeah. Which is what the job is, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And, I think that elected officials are, the council is supposed to come into the position and they are supposed to set budgets, set policies and procedures, and then of course serve as the constituents' representative for making sure that the town is doing business the way it should be doing business. So I frankly don't see anything wrong with a council member asking important questions about what is going on within the town that I'm elected to be a representative of.
Yeah. Okay.
So that meeting was, I think it was May 28th is the meeting that we went into. And of course, this time we walk into the room and it's got a very different feeling. You can see kind of the frustration on different people's faces. The directors look very disappointed. And there's just a general feeling of the room that, this isn't good. And so myself and several other council members just answering some very pointed questions. How did we get here? How did we not project that we were going to be here? And really there were no answers given. Everything was very, we'll look into that and we'll get back to you. And probably the most frustrating of all of those points was the staff presented several ideas about how they could balance the budget. And that came everything in forms from, we're going to do wage cuts all the way across the town, total town staff. We're going to cut wages. We're going to cut wages for administrators. And then there was probably the biggest recommendation that I think got pushed was, well, let's just raise our sales tax 0.5%. And through that conversation, we started asking questions like, okay, well, if we were to raise sales tax 0.5%, what does that mean? Well, it's about $1 million in revenue. And it wasn't me, it was another council member that asked, and how far down the road does that get us? 3, 5, 10 years before we, encounter the next spending roadblock, if you will. And the answer that was given back to us was, no, that just balances the budget for this year. And that just kind of leads to the short-sightedness that this management team had. There was no view into the future. They weren't thinking about 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. They were thinking about tomorrow. And that was extraordinarily frustrating for me. In that same meeting, we talked about a lot of other things. We talked about coordination between the town and town staff and evaluations that need to be done on employees, because evaluations are really the managers, nothing else. It's once a year that you get to sit down with people and go, here's what I want you to accomplish over the next 12 months. And here's how you're doing as on a daily level at your job.
Yes.
And we were told that was being done. And in order for employees to get raises, they should have gotten an evaluation.
Right.
And so I left that meeting that day pretty frustrated that we really didn't have any answers to questions. I didn't feel like I was any more prepared to have a conversation about how we got here than I was.
So just to be clear, was that a general question or was a specific question asked about?
No, it was a specific question that was asked to the town manager about him doing evaluations on his direct report employees.
Okay. And his answer was?
That he had done evaluations on all of his employees.
Okay.
And so, again, I left that meeting very frustrated that I wasn't any more prepared to have a conversation about how we got here or what we were going to do to fix it than I was when I walked into the meeting that morning, which was pretty frustrating because it was I think about an 8-hour day. Yeah. Sitting in that room. And so I went home that night, and again, I was reflecting and trying to figure out, I felt like I knew how governments get themselves into problems. But I was trying to figure out, how do I find it? What is it that I'm going to look at? Because frankly, at this point, I started to feel like I was getting stonewalled about what was really going on. Right. And so I went on the town's website and I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request. A FOIA request is what it's called. And in that, I asked for all of the personnel action forms, PAFs, that were done in the last 3 years. So a PAF is done anytime an employee wants to change their benefit status, or they get a raise, or they get an evaluation, or anything that's done with an employee. They fill out a personnel action form. And so I asked for all of the personnel action forms for the last 3 years. I asked for the town's adopted wage scale, and I asked for all evaluations done on every employee at the town for the last 3 years.
Which is all public information.
Which is public information. Any member of the public could come in at any given point in time and request any of that information. As a council member, I don't feel like I should have had to fill out a Freedom of Information Act request to get it, but I felt like I needed to do that so that I had a legal document that supported that I had requested the information. And I would tell you that as an immediate result of that Freedom of Information Act request, the town management proceeded to lead the town into chaos. There were emails being fired out to staff that I was receiving copies of. There were emails being fired out to other cities and towns. And I was just kind of surprised because I'm like, like anybody could have submitted this at any given point in time. And if there's, I guess maybe a little bit of assumption on my part, but if you don't have anything to hide, then you're never worried about just providing information to the public.
And this is a little different than peeking into somebody's business or peeking into somebody's personal life. This is government money, government taxes. It's the public's information.
Correct. And then that's exactly why things like the Freedom of Information Act request exist, is because the public should have access to see how their money is being spent.
Okay.
And so, and I hadn't been presented any of these documents, by the way. I have no idea what is in them at this point, but all of this chaos is happening in the background. And so, long and the short, or I guess the shorter version of the story is the town manager writes a letter of resignation. He presents it to the council, and as a point in that letter, he says that if myself, Vice Mayor Sterling Buse, and Councilor Phillips will resign, he and the finance director will stay on, but he was not going to have his integrity questioned. And so if we were going to remain on the council, he was going to resign. And so, and again, I still have not been produced any of these documents. I have no idea what's in them. And so, weekend goes by, move into the beginning of the next week. I was out of town. I came back into town, and one of the other council members had picked up my packet, ream and a half-ish of documents in a copy machine that were presented to me, and we had a budget meeting scheduled for that Thursday. So I sat down at home and diligently went through all of these documents and plugged them all into an Excel spreadsheet where I could see and compile data and see what we were looking at. And during that process, I found a number of things that were concerning, and probably the most significant of which at that moment in time was that there was not one director in the town had been given an evaluation in the last 3 years. All of them had been given raises, but not one of them had received an evaluation from the town manager on their performance in the total 3-year period that I had requested. And
which you were specifically told had been done.
Which we were specifically told had been done.
Okay.
And yet when you looked at the majority, and I'm not going to say all, because it's a lot of documents and I'm maybe misremember, a little bit, but the majority of all the other employees in the organization had received an evaluation from the directors. So the directors were giving out evaluations to the people that were in their employ, but the directors were not getting any evaluations from their leadership.
I can say personally, I did get a review. So if you want to pull public information requests on my reviews, they're there.
Also in that, I found out that 21 of the town's employees were paid higher than their pay scale allowed them to be paid. And so what I'm talking about is, you have an approved pay scale, and in that pay scale, it identifies employee X does job X.
Right.
And that pay scale is $40,000 to $75,000 a year. That's what that position pays. And unless you move into another position, you can't ever make higher than $75,000. That's the top of the pay scale.
Right.
We had 21 employees in the town that were paid, some of them significantly higher than the adopted pay scale allowed them to be paid. And so that was another concern. There were several staff members on the town that had received as many as 7 pay increases in 1 year, which was not disclosed to the town. It wasn't on any approved pay scale. It wasn't in the policy manual that I could find. It was just arbitrary raises that were given out, that were asked for, I should say, by directors and approved by the town manager and the finance director and executed. They were given these raises. As I ran through this process, and one of the excuses that was given, the state eliminated the rental tax. And so, but I was uniquely familiar with the rental tax, and I remember it being around $350,000 in revenue that we had lost. So it wasn't, it's a significant amount of money, but it's not $1.7 million. And so as I sat down and I looked at essentially all the raises that were given out in the last 3 years, and then the employee related expense that goes along with those raises, like retirement and healthcare and all the other expenses that increase as a result of giving out raises.
Right.
And I plugged that into the sheet, and then I added the rental tax. I was at $1.7 million. And I don't know if that doesn't seem like a coincidence to me, but the numbers were really close to each other. So kind of an uncontrolled lack of foresight. Hey, we're going to take care of, we're going to give these people raises, and we're really not going to think about the long-term impacts of those raises. But that compounds itself year over year for a government agency, and it's something you have to really watch closely. And so that information was compiled and it was presented to council. But of course, at this point, we've lost the town manager and the finance director who left. And I need to be clear that there was no backdoor, hey, you guys need to leave or else. There was none of that happened. It was, I submitted a FOIA request.
It was pretty much an information request, and they left. Yes. And that from the inside, I can tell you, was exactly, we were just as like, whoa, what? And then there were some things going on as you were about to do that. So, but there was a lot of after that second budget or the third budget meeting, as you were saying, it escalated quickly to where you're at.
Correct. And so, I think the week following that, I felt compelled to go try to visit with the town departments, to go sit in front of people and let them have direct conversations with me and just kind of fill in the gaps. And that, depending on where you went and what stories were being told, was either mildly accepted, or it was not well received, or in some cases it was well received. But you could definitely tell that there were maybe some different storylines going on around the town about what was going on and why it was going on. And at least in some cases, it was very clear that it was all pointed directly at me, as I was just being a bad guy and a bully. And I don't feel like I was being that way at all. And so moving forward, I was sitting in a meeting, and somebody had brought up to me that, it was these really nice guys, and, it was really nice to get our cash bonus every year. And I kind of took a pause, and I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that I hadn't heard that before. But as a government employee, I didn't think cash really meant cash, because it shouldn't mean cash. There's no ability to do that. And I
can tell you personally that yes, I received $100 cash twice each Christmas directly from it seemed like it came from the town manager. I can't even really remember. I remember there was a Christmas card. It would show up and it would be sitting on my desk, and it had $100 in it. So yes,
And so from my perspective, I kind of took a moment, I dug into that a little bit further, and I was like, are you saying like physical money? And they were like, yes, physical money in a card. And it came to us in, a card like you're describing. And I, again, my point there wasn't at that moment to discuss that, but I dug into it a little bit and then I stuck it in my file and I went on to talk about, hey, we're okay. We're going to be okay. And I left that meeting and I went to the finance person at town hall and I said, hey, can you pull up any large cash disbursements from the town over the period of the last, I want to say 3 years, maybe I did 5. I don't exactly remember. But she was able to go into the computer system. She pulled it up real quick for me and she was able to pull up 3 large cash disbursements, all kind of surrounding the holiday period that were written out as petty cash to the town manager. And it totaled around $50,000, $50,000 in cash. And so, the next thing I asked for was I said, hey, I'd like to see copies of these checks. I'd like to see copies of the check request forms because in government, there's multiple layers to getting a check issued or distributed. And during that time, I was informed by several staff members that they had heard conversations where the finance director was telling the town manager that it wasn't legal for them to do this and it shouldn't be done, and several other things. But ultimately, I've got these checks sitting in front of me now, canceled checks that are sitting in front of me with a check request form, which shows every employee of the town and that every employee was supposed to get $200 in cash. And it was listed out in names, but there was no follow-up. There was no signature sheet that, Rob, you as an employee of the town at the time, that you signed that you received your card with the cash in it. There was no tracking mechanism for the actual disbursements. As I looked across the checks, I noticed that the mayor's signature was one of the 2 signatures that authorized the check. And so I was concerned because you're authorizing these purchases that are clearly, in my opinion, a violation of how taxpayer money should be used. And so here's a signature on this check as by town policy, one of 2 approvals required to get a check. And I was then informed that the mayor's signature was printed on the checks, which was a violation of to me, a violation of the financial policies for the town because they should require 2 live signatures in order to be authorized. If you allow people to use stamps or print their signatures on the check, it seems like you're violating one of the initial steps of the town policy, which is that 2 people are authorizing all of the expenses.
Right.
And so that led me to start digging a little bit more. And as we move forward now, we're starting to get into a realm where we're now looking at bringing on an interim town manager. And so I'm continuing to dig in the background, and as a council member, maybe with a little lack of years of service doing it, right? I expected that we were going to post a job for an interim town manager. We were going to look at some candidates for an interim town manager. We were going to go through a process to bring on maybe an interim town manager, or maybe we would look at somebody internally that could take over as an interim town manager. And the next thing I know, we have an agenda before us with one guy on a list that had been hand selected to come in and be our interim town manager. And I was like, what is going on? Like, how did we get here? And so took some time. I reached out, talked to the guy on the phone. I knew him because he was serving on our planning and zoning commission, and he had a history with the city of Coolidge, being a town manager there. And but I was still just concerned, like, how did we get here? And aren't we going to interview some people? Aren't we going to do? And it was like this rushed push to get this guy seated. And it definitely drew some questions for me. But at the end of the day, I'll own my right hand. I even asked in the open meeting to Mr. Miller, is there any need that we need to do this today? Does this need to be a rush decision? And he said no. But he was the only guy standing before us that day, and the motion was made to appoint him as the interim town manager, and I raised my hand too. And so ultimately, he ended up sitting as the interim town manager. And then we continue through the process. He's there. One of his initial tasks, as you might imagine, is to balance the budget. And it seemed like we went on for several months, and the budget wasn't being balanced, and there was just a lot of chaos that was going on, because in the other thing that we had done in the interim is we had appointed an external finance director, which is something I think is amazing, because you sit in an office across from somebody every day, and maybe you get to a point where you develop a relationship. And as I stated, there were some employees who had said, hey, there was a conversation happening where the finance director was telling the town manager that the Christmas bonus program was illegal and shouldn't be happening. And I don't have that with any authority. Right? That's hearsay stuff that happened, but it was said. And so what I'm saying is it was said to me that this conversation happened. And so, but it still leads to the problem that even though there seemed to be some disagreement about what was going to happen with the finances, ultimately the check was still issued and it was still cashed, right? With an external finance director, I think that has a lot lower probability of happening, because an external finance director, their reputation is just on how they manage statewide budgets. And so if they have a financial problem, then their reputation is going to be tarnished, and then they lose clients. And that is a pretty good accountability mechanism for a company that comes in and does that.
You bet.
That doesn't necessarily happen with finance directors.
No,
because they just leave wherever they're at, where maybe they didn't do such a good job, and they just go somewhere else and they get another job as a finance director somewhere else. And so, anyways, I thought that was a great thing. But now there was this struggle within the town between the town manager, the directors, the town manager's finance guy that he had brought in, that they had a relationship together, and the finance department, who is saying, look, we're looking over this stuff and we're not going to continue doing business this way. And so this internal power struggle that continued to happen for several months, where this conversation, well, we're not in that bad of a position, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And then the finance director saying, no, this is not how we're going to move forward. We need to make sure we have good financial reserves. We need to make sure we're spending money appropriately. And that all kind of came down to one particular finance meeting where I think myself and several other council members were like, look, we got to quit having this conversation. Like we need to get past this, and we need to balance the budget. And we gave a pretty stark timeline for this budget will be balanced by this day. I think it was 30 or 45 days from that particular meeting. And in that meeting, still, we're having directors arguing with the finance director. And so the finance director kind of came out and said, look, this is my whole job, and I understand government finance, and I understand procurement, and I understand state law as it comes to how you can spend public money, and we are not going to do this. And so just get it through your heads. At that same meeting, 2 more letters of resignations dropped.
Did you get the feeling that during this time that while the leadership had left and had resigned and moved on, that they were still giving input to certain people and influencing decisions or arguments?
Rob, I would actually go a little bit farther than that. And I would say right now, while we're having this meeting today, that is still taking place to some degree in the town, that the people that have left are still having regular conversations and still trying to influence the decisions that are going on inside the town, even though they all chose to exit the organization. And frankly, if I chose to exit the organization, I'm going to exit the organization and move on with my life. And so it definitely draws a question in my mind as to why are you so intimately focused on what is going on in an organization you chose to left for whatever the reasons you chose to leave. But I think it's still going on today. I think it was going on back then. I think as a matter of fact, I think it was said in several circumstances in public meetings that, so-and-so had talked to the old finance director, and he said that these guys just didn't understand what they were doing, and that he had done this and this and this. And if they just did the same thing, that they would see that the budget's fine. And, sitting in the room with a company that manages, $500 million in government finance every year in the state of Arizona, who's going, you can't do that.
Right.
And so I'm not a finance expert. I'm not, but I trust the people that do that for a living. And when they're saying that you legally cannot do what was being done, I trust that. Because it's not just the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. They manage a lot of government money, and I think they know their jobs as well. And so we finally pushed forward, and we were finally able to get to the point where we had a balanced budget. Though I was not necessarily happy about how we got there, because honestly, the interim town manager just kind of took it upon himself to say, here's the dollars and cents that I'm going to take out of the budget. And then he just delivered it to the directors. And of course, that caused an extraordinary amount of chaos because nobody was included in the conversations.
Right.
And I feel like if you're going to have a leadership position, you've got to bring your team with you. And these decisions were all kind of just getting made in a vacuum. Then they were getting delivered to the people that are supposed to go execute the services. And yet the people that were supposed to execute the services were not included in the conversation at all. So at least during my career, I've come to find that the people that do the job are the ones that's going to tell you where they can make the cuts.
Right.
And if they're not included in the conversation, then you're probably cutting places where you don't understand the impacts of the cuts that you're making. But the long and the short of it is, or the short of it rather, is, Rick had some personal stuff going on, and I feel terrible about the things that happened while he was trying to help out the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. And he ultimately exited the organization, and we moved forward from there.
So during that, there's two things I want to make sure that we address. One is you got called out online for asking about check register at one point. I want you to sort of explain why that occurred and what you were pointing out and what was going on there.
I appreciate that. As we kind of dived into what we were talking about there's kind of this chaos that's going on behind the scenes. And one of the things that we were trying to do was we were trying to curb spending. Like, you've got to quit spending money on all of these expenses that don't really make a lot of sense.
Right.
And that wasn't happening because they were having this internal power struggle about, well, these guys just don't know what they're doing. There's plenty of money there, and you just don't know what you're doing. So we're just going to keep doing business as we've been doing business. And so the financial reports come out on the consent agenda, which was, I know I'm going a little bit backwards here, but
go backwards because you're going to talk about the delay.
Which was the same place where the management had said to us, well, you guys approved those Christmas bonuses. And I said, that was never on a council agenda. We did not do that. And they said, yes, it was. It was right there on the check register. You guys authorized it. And so I actually took the time because I'm totally about owning when I make mistakes or when I do things that shouldn't be. So I go back, I look at the check registers, and sure enough, I find the petty cash check written to the town manager. And the interesting thing about that is the money had been spent, the cards had been given out to employees, and the consent agenda that came on was March of the following year. So 4 months later, we get this across the town managers, or across the consent agenda. And I actually remember now going back, and I remember seeing this expense, and yes, it's a full amount of money, $15,000 or whatever, written out to petty cash for the town manager. But when you go over to the right-hand side, it's divvied up into all of these different funds and all of these different line items within the budget. And it doesn't necessarily say something very out front like holiday bonuses for employees. It says, I don't remember, something different. But anyways, one could come to the conclusion that, oh, this is something simple like restocking petty cash within the departments, or maybe registers for when people come to the police department and pay fines, that they have some cash on hand to provide change or something like that. So, and I remember looking at the expense as I went back and looked at it, a year in advance or a year behind, went back to the town council agenda, looked at it, found it within the check register. And so moving forward, we get to this particular meeting, and we had been presented the council packet on a Friday, and I had sat down over the weekend and I had gone through the check register, and the things I was looking at was like, we're in a financial crisis. Why are we spending $15,000 on temporary employees? We're buying T-shirts. We're paying for lunch at Charlie Clark's for an entire roads crew. I just went through the whole list and I highlighted all the purchase card expenses and all the check register expenses that I found to be questionable expenses, especially when we're having a conversation about being $1.7 million short on our budget and potentially laying people off. And it's the same pot of money, right? You can either go to lunch at Charlie Clark's and spend $350 on an extravagant lunch for your people, or you maybe will keep a guy employed for the next 12 months.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so,
fair enough.
And so I said, I've had these conversations behind the scenes. I've been talking about it. I've been talking about it with management, and nothing seems to be changing here. So I went to the town hall on Monday morning. I presented my highlighted list to the town manager, interim town manager at the time, which I believe was Christy. Rick was still sitting in the official seat, but he was out dealing with some personal issues. And so Christy was there. I said, here's what I'm going to ask questions about come Thursday. I'm going to ask for this item to be removed from the consent agenda, and we're going to go through it line by line because I want to hear from the people that are spending the money that they think this is responsible spending.
Right.
And so, and in the process of that week, I had also personally reached out to every director that I was going to question, and I told them what I was going to do and what I was going to question them on.
Yep.
Show up to the council meeting that Thursday night. I had gotten feedback from the interim town manager, acting town manager, I should say, that they had been able to pull all the receipts and they were well prepared to answer the questions. Walk into the room and I shouldn't say the entire, but a good majority of the public works staff is sitting in the council chambers. And they came in well prepared to, I guess you could say that the appearance was that there was a cheerleader in that department who had said, we all need to show up at this council meeting and we need to light the council up, light the town manager up, if you will, about what's going to happen at this council meeting. So
right.
I asked for the item to be removed from the consent agenda. I gave an opening that I wouldn't normally do this. I didn't feel like this was the right way to handle business, but in this particular circumstance, I felt like these things needed to be read in an open meeting to the public and honestly to the employees that are spending the money. Like, do you really think this is responsible use of taxpayer dollars? And so I read those expenses out. I think it was 45 minutes long of me reading expenses and getting explanations from the staff about $350 in fitted polo t-shirts that needed to be bought
for fit shirts,
employees, and extraordinarily expensive work boots, and multiple receipts to restaurants where we were feeding employees over and over and over again. And I want to be clear about, I'm not opposed to going out and buying employees lunch, but when it happens every single day and it's at expensive restaurants where it definitely starts to draw some concern. Like, is Little Caesars Pizza, if we needed to buy lunch that day, maybe that's a good thing. Or, taking people out every once in a while for a nice meal. I'm not opposed to that, but it's over and over and over and over again in this particular register that it was just a routine thing that we did. And and so there was tons of expenses in there that I don't remember all of them, but the point was to call them out in public.
But just so you know, you can go onto the YouTube channel and see that meeting. It's still there. And if I can find it, I'll actually just link it down below here.
Sure. Yeah. It's all of our stuff is all out there. It's definitely able for people to go view it. And so, but the result was what I wanted when the next consent agenda item for the financial statements came up the following month. Our expenses had reduced significantly. And quite frankly, that has stayed, that the town staff has done a phenomenal job over the last several months since that meeting. So you're probably talking 7 or 8 months ago now, at keeping our expenses necessary and low. And so it had the desired effect.
So something else during this time happened that I know you've brought it before and I want to make people aware of. the way, like with the consent agenda, whenever it comes up, you as an individual on the council can pull that off of the agenda and ask for it to be explained. Something you couldn't do was get something put on the agenda.
Yeah, correct. So it was actually, when you get brought onto the council, either in an appointment or in an election, they actually provide you with a binder. And the binder is, council member bylaws, town code, planning and zoning, and then it goes into the policies and procedures for the town. And I assume the expectation is not that you just put that on a shelf and let it collect dust. So of course I took time to read the bylaws and understand what my position was and things like that. But through that process, one of the things that I noticed was, as a new council member, you're required to go down and do open meeting law training. And so in our town code, it said the mayor, the town manager, or any 3 council members can set an item on an agenda. And I always thought that was interesting because in order for...
Let me explain something real quick, just so people understand. By open meeting law, there's 7 seats on the Pinetop-Lakeside Town Council. That means that 4 people constitute a quorum, and 4 people can make a decision for the town. So if there were just 4 people there and they voted unanimously, they could pass anything that was before the council on an agenda. Now, to not violate a quorum, and you'll notice that sometimes there'll be an event where all the council members are there, and there's a public notice that goes out, the potential quorum. You are restricted by law not to talk about anything that you would vote upon or anything like that whenever you're all together in a place.
Correct.
And violate or actually constitute a quorum. So 3 people, when any 3 individuals on the council, whether a mayor or not a mayor, talk about a topic, they can talk. 3 of them can talk. The second and 4th person is involved, you've violated state law. You've now violated a quorum, and that either has to be reported or it needs to be stopped. Or if it's found out, and it's found out that those 4 people discussed and made a change, then there actually can be a legal complication. And that actually applies, by the way, when you're in an executive session as well.
Correct.
You can't decide in an executive session how to vote because that's specifically illegal as well. But I just want people to understand that. So that's why the 3 is key here. And you explain that.
Yeah, and I think that the genesis of the open meeting law is to make sure that decisions are made in the public.
Yeah, the business of the public is done in public.
Correct. And
not
so what they don't want
doors.
is they don't want people going to, whatever event, and all of a sudden they're discussing an item that's going on at the town, and then now they come out to a council meeting and they just go, and right, the discussion and the decision was already made, at some other event. So that the open meeting law is supposed to help prevent that. So I always thought it was a conundrum because the mayor, the town manager, or any 3 council members can set an item on an agenda. Now, proper rules for the meeting would be that if you wanted something on an agenda, you would go to the mayor and you'd say, Mayor, I'd like to have this item put on an agenda. And the mayor would say yes or no. But that creates a legal issue, because if you go to the mayor and you say, I would like to have this item on the agenda, and the mayor says no, then you've now lost the ability, because you've got to go to 3 council members now and
2 others, and you can't.
And 2 others,
Yeah.
and that would be 4, and that would be an open meeting law violation. So I had brought this up probably at least 2 or 3 times in study sessions, work sessions of the council. I brought it up, I think, at least twice in an open meeting, and it never got changed. And so, and I can tell you from personal experience that what I thought would happen happened when I went to 2 other council members and I said, I'd like your support to get this item put on the agenda. And they supported me in that item. That the mayor was very upset that she wasn't included in the process. And so moving forward, we were able to, the town code now reads that any 2 council members can set an item on an agenda, the mayor, the manager, or any 2 council members.
So to be clear, you violated the protocol. You did not go to the mayor. You went to 2 other council members. It got put on the agenda. They voted, and the actual council voted to then pass it and make it so that it was just 2 moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah. So the majority of the council supported the decision.
Correct.
Okay.
But it did create the chaos in the background because, the head of state, if you will, is the mayor. And of course, I wasn't able to consult the mayor because if
you did,
I would have been thwarted in being able to get the item on the agenda altogether if that decision hadn't been supported by the mayor.
Right.
And so that has now changed, but you kind of go back and you look at several things or decisions that were made through the council that we didn't have any control over what was being put on the agendas. We were just being told what was going to be on the agendas, and then we had to kind of deal with that moving forward.
Right.
And so, I guess moving on from that, we have kind of gone forward, and I have to say that I feel like we're in a positive position today. But gosh, this whole process moving forward has been rather chaotic. It seems like there have been several things that have happened, like, for example, I don't know if anybody noticed, but there really wasn't a lot of information being shared with the public. And that was because it continued to be kind of squashed internally that we were, there's nothing to see here at the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. We're perfect and we don't need to be sharing any information because there's nothing to see here. And so I actually wrote a press release to be transparent. I've been consulting that kind of as a guiding document as we're having this conversation. And I actually got to the point where I had asked, like, we need to release information to the public. It's a small town. People are going to talk, and there's conversations happening around town, and there's no information being released from the town. And so I actually wrote a press release, and in the town bylaws, it says the mayor is the spokesperson for the town.
Yep.
So you cannot bypass the mayor. That's the person that's going to communicate with the public about whatever's going on within the town. That wasn't happening. And so I said, okay, again, trying to think through how can I get something on the record. I wrote a press release and I said, I think we should this is an open meeting, by the way, it was a study session. And I said, I think we should be releasing information to the public. And I said, if I was sitting in a position to release information to the public, here's what I would release. And I read my press release. And then immediately following that meeting, we finally went ahead and released our first official information to the residents of the town about what was going on within the town. And that included many of the things that had been found. Like I said, I'm sure I'm not putting all the puzzle pieces together, but it included many of the things that were discovered throughout this entire process that were, frankly, just a lack of management. The town was not being managed appropriately. And therefore we had a lot of financial oversight issues. We had many expenditures that were being made under emergency authorizations that had no quotes or no bids. We were expending, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of dollars with little to no oversight on what was being spent under those accounts. And it all just came back to a lack of oversight and management from the people in the town that were supposed to be doing that. And so you can see that kind of play out as we move forward, right? We've asked for updates on projects, when they're going to be completed, what their budgets are. And the answer is they don't know. They don't know when they're going to be completed because we've just kind of run around the town, and because we weren't really communicating and managing ourselves internally, that everybody was just kind of executing whatever they thought was the most important project of the day.
Right.
Those things weren't being done to any kind of budgets. So even though council had set a do not exceed $150,000 on X project, when you actually go back and look at the money that was spent on that project, it might be $250,000 or $300,000 because the money was just being executed without oversight. And a lot of that was being done under this. If you go into the town's financial policies and you read them individually, you will see a line in there that says the town manager can authorize up to $50,000 in expenses. But it doesn't really say that. When you read the financial policies in whole, it says the town manager can execute up to $50,000 in expenses for items that were disclosed and budgeted for within the fiscal year budget.
Yes.
But what was being done is these pots of money were actually just being set aside in the budget. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the fiscal year, we need to buy 2 vans for the town. And the town manager would just go execute the purchase of 2 vans and never even bring it to the council because he could authorize that expense up to $50,000.
Right.
And so that just created this kind of cycle of uncontrolled spending and uncontrolled wage growth and frankly put us into the position that we're in now. I'm not just going to cast stones. I was sitting on the council for 4 years of that time, and I have some culpability in that. And for that, I am truly sorry. And one thing that I can say is that I learn from my mistakes, and I move forward with plans in place to make sure that those things never happen again. And so as a town, that's all I have asked for is we don't need to dwell on how we got where we got, but we need to understand how we got where we got. And then we need to move forward in such a way that we don't let those things happen again. And during this period, I was actually at a coffee with council, and one of my counterparts was there speaking, and the comment was made, we've been here before, and we've been way worse than we are now. And I thought that was one of the craziest statements I had ever heard, because it led to the fact that as a political official, an elected official, this cycle had been seen and repeated several times during the course of that person's career in politics.
Right.
And in my head, what it said to me was there have been no actions taken to make sure that what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago wouldn't happen again. And gosh, in all of my training and experience, that is not management. That is not looking at all the data you have in front of you to make good decisions and plan responsibly. It's kind of just living your career 1 year at a time.
Yeah.
And gosh, man, I still think back to that particular statement, and I go, that I'm frankly appalled that was a statement that was made, because I don't want to ever have to make a statement like that. Like, I'm totally okay with making a mistake.
Yes.
Like, everybody makes mistakes, and I'll own that I made a mistake, and maybe didn't provide as much oversight as I should have, because I thought I had people in there that were trustworthy and were giving us honest and accurate information. But clearly that wasn't the case, and I'll own it. I should have done more, but I don't ever intend to make that mistake twice. And there are absolutely things we can do that we can put into place in this town that are happening right now today that will make sure that we never end up in that position again. I'm not saying it's going to be sunshine and roses. I'm not saying we're going to maintain all the roads we should be maintaining, because it's all dollars and cents at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we can surely make sure that we put ourselves in a position that we can financially manage ourselves well into the future without ever having to go through a crazy financial problem that doesn't have a direct correlation to something unpredictable like the financial crash of 2007, for example.
Or a fire or something else.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And we have a responsibility to this town to make sure that we have financial reserves in place so that when that fire comes into town, when that thing happens that drives people out of this community for a time, that we can continue to operate the town and pay the employees and do all the things we need to do while the tax revenue is not coming in, because we are entirely sales tax based. And so we have a responsibility to be able to run this town for a period of time. I'm not saying forever, but for a period of time in a financial crisis, in an emergency situation. Because if you're asking a guy to stay here and run a grader in town and make sure that the town stays protected with our police officers while everybody leaves and evacuates the community, then we better dang sure be able to give them paychecks while they're doing it.
Yeah. So we've almost covered an hour, and I probably haven't answered, or you haven't answered, a single question that people ask online, because they haven't understood the underground story and the real foundational fix that needs to occur. So when people ask questions like, well, what are you going to do with the parks? Or what are you going to do with, why isn't my road getting fixed? Or what are you pro-business or you anti-business? So all those stances are kind of not relevant until we get stability at the town level.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think, a major focus for me is the town is supposed to be really a maintenance organization, right? I was out knocking on doors. I met with a guy, and he said to me, and I thought it was great, and I'm going to repeat it. And he said to me, we don't need to be growing and building all these new things. We need to be taking care of what we already have. And we haven't been doing that. It's great to have this brand new road over here. But while we were building that brand new road, we didn't maintain the 10 miles of town road that we should have maintained. And so now that road's falling apart. And if we let it fall apart enough, then what do we have to do? We have to build a new road. That doesn't make sense. We built the roads. Let's maintain them. Let's keep the town clean. Let's do that kind of stuff. And I believe we can do that within the budgets that we have established. And so you're right. But there's a lot of questions that come out about pro-growth or anti-growth, and I'll say that I'm pro-growth because I feel like if you don't grow, you die. And,
yes.
But I'm not looking to be Scottsdale or Phoenix or Flagstaff or Prescott. But some growth is good, and so.
But you want to make sure. I think what I'm hearing is that you want to make sure that if you grow, you got a solid foundation upon which to build.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the main points of the town is to provide services to the residents and the businesses, not to pick winners or losers, right? We're supposed to provide the environment where business can exist and thrive, but not necessarily pick the business that's going to open up in the particular point right within the town. And so
talk to me about infrastructure. Talk to me about the fact that the town of Pinetop-Lakeside doesn't have water, doesn't have sewer. What do you think that looks like in the future?
I think that one of the biggest issues to any kind of growth or even revitalization efforts in the town is, of course, the state and the United States is constantly progressing with building codes and fire codes and things like that. And so when you talk about all of those new things that are coming in, you're talking about, hey, if you're going to build a new commercial business or you're going to remodel that building to become a new commercial business, well, you have to be able to meet certain fire flow requirements, or maybe you might have to put in a sprinkler system in that commercial building, right? And the thing that's missing is in the town of Pinetop-Lakeside, we've got all these small special districts. Whereas if you go down to the city of Show Low, the city of Show Low operates water and sewer within the city. If you go to the city of Phoenix, they operate water and sewer. It's part of the city. But in the town of Pinetop-Lakeside, we have, roads, streets, libraries, police. And then the water companies are privately or special districts. The sanitary district is a special district. And so that to me does bring a challenge because you might say, hey, we want to revitalize the downtown area of Lakeside, but without the proper water infrastructure in that area, the businesses are going to sit there vacant because nobody can afford to remodel them or I shouldn't say nobody can afford to remodel them, but if they come in to remodel them and the very next conversation is, well, you got to pay Arizona Water, $1 million to bring in an 8-inch water main to your business, that's a deal breaker for most businesses. And so I think that I'm not necessarily saying that the town has to take over all of that stuff, but that's one option, right? But how do we work together in a community partnership to help these Pinetop Water, Pinetop-Lakeside Sanitary District, Arizona Water, and then several other small water organizations in town. How do we build the relationships with those guys if it's not coming into the town, which doesn't have to, but how do we help those guys get the money, build the relationships that they need to get the storage capacity, to get the pumps put in, to get the water infrastructure put in that will help our town be able to revitalize, be able to take some of those old businesses and reopen them up into a vibrant something that meets the town, and quite frankly, provide the kind of water infrastructure we really need to protect ourselves against the wildfire that might come in to this beautiful forest that we live in.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, let's just get into why do you believe people should vote for you for as the mayor of Pinetop-Lakeside?
I think really honestly, the biggest piece for me is I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to sit down with you or any community member at any given point in time. Where you mentioned earlier, we're here at the Pinetop Coffee House. I think I've come here at this point maybe half a dozen, maybe 10 times, and I've met with residents who have reached out to me directly that just wanted to have a face-to-face conversation, understand me better. I'm a straight shooter. I'm not gonna tell you something I don't stand on, that I can't, promises that I can't keep. I'm not gonna just say that to try to get your vote. I want you to vote for me because you think I'm the right person for the job. And I can tell you that there's people out there right now today who I think are advocating for me to be in this position, not because they agree with me, but because we have been able to sit and have real, honest conversations. And even though they disagree with my position on some items, they love the fact that they can sit down and have a real conversation with me where I will explain to them the reasons that I think something should or should not happen, and they don't have to guess. And I'm not going to just tell them that I agree with their position and then thwart them behind the scenes. I believe in real, honest conversation, that your word is all you have. And so when you're going out to meet people and you're going to represent them, you should be able to sit and have a conversation with them at any given point in time. I've been in government management for quite a while. I believe we operate a very fiscally responsible organization. So I think I have that to bring to the table. I understand government finance. And I'll be very honest about that. I feel like in the last several months, we have put some amazing management in place in the town. I see amazing things that are happening with moving us towards a professional organization. And I want to see that through. And I don't feel like it's the mayor's job to be in the town hall every day running the town. I feel like it's the mayor's job to be out in the community, talking with the people and making sure that the town is getting the proper oversight that it needs, and the management and the employees are getting the kind of support that they need. And sometimes what that looks like is the town management is having to execute some difficult things. And the mayor's job is to go out in the community and have those conversations with the people so that they understand why those difficult things are happening and what our plan is for moving forward. And so I don't feel like it's not a strong mayor form of government. My position is not to be sitting in town hall every day telling everybody what to do. My position is to be out in the community with the people that elected me and to be having real conversations with them about what our town is doing and how we're moving into the future.
Yeah. And remember that the mayor has a single vote, just like every other person on the council. And now 2 members can bring an agenda item, an item onto the agenda.
Yes, and I look forward to, if the people here give me the opportunity to be the mayor, I look forward to being to unifying that council, because yes, the mayor is the spokesperson for the town, and yes, the mayor has some intricate responsibilities that are given to the mayor for that position, but ultimately, the mayor's one vote of 7 members of council. And if anybody hasn't ever served on a council or a board, it's very interesting, because really it's 7 votes to make one decision. And so trying to unify that front when you get into real difficult decision making is sometimes a challenge. But it is the way that our government is set up to run, and I believe in it. And so I don't necessarily believe that every 7 people on the council have to vote yes on every item. I like debate. I like having a 5-2 vote or a 4-3 vote, because to me it really means that people are digging into the issues, and maybe those constituents can't support that topic and these constituents can. And so I really feel like that's more of the engagement I would like to see in our community, that we get into real issues, that real issues come before the council, and that the community can see that all of the council members, right, myself included, if I get to serve as the mayor, are representing their interests and the community as a whole, and trying to make the best decisions we can with the information presented.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. This is Taber Heisler. He is running for mayor of the town of Pinetop-Lakeside.